All right, we're going to talk a little bit about this particular case right here. The unpublished court stripping. The court stripping is what Anthony Lewis, he was a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter with the New York Times. Anthony Lewis, court stripping. And a lot of people refer to it as the rocket docket. Now, folks, when you have federal judges like Edith Jones from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, from the U.S. Fifth Circuit, and then you've got this Judge Posner up in the Seventh Circuit, and folks like Anthony Lewis referring to it as corruption beyond recognition. This is how they're describing the treatment of people before the courts. Now, when you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that this Judge Niemeyer, Motes, King, and Judge Boyle from the Fourth Circuit Court, that's Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. The Fourth Circuit Court of the United States has decided to, very secretively, not explain anything about their decision, and then, of course, no publication of the case. The reality of the case is quite simply this. They claim that states, all the states, have state sovereign immunity from when they destroy and take property and don't pay compensation. And that's simply just not a fact at all. And then they say that New York State doesn't have the minimum state contacts in the Fourth Circuit. Enough minimum state contacts to invoke the interstate jurisdiction known as diversity of citizenship, where one party can sue another party that's located in another state. This is why this case was deep-sixed. And the problem is that New York State is membered with 25 different interstate compacts in the Fourth Circuit. 25 organizations within the Fourth Circuit New York State does business with on an extremely significant scale every day. State business to state business, state to state business in the Fourth Circuit. And when this is proven without any question to the federal courts, they go totally silent. The facts of this case involve a massive destruction of property that went on for years on Lake George, New York, with up and down, up and down, up and down water levels during the wintertime. And the numbers of witnesses that I've got and the records that I possess and provided to the court are nothing short of massive and staggering. The state of New York itself litigated this up and down water nonsense, where they're flushing huge amounts of sewage and leachate contaminated water down the Poop Chute River, the Lachute River, which was full of 2 million cubic yards of industrial waste and chemicals. 2 million cubic yards. That's a pile a mile, 2 miles high and an acre in size. 1 acre square, 2 miles high, massive giant pile of toxic slop. And it sits on the bottom of Lake Champlain, right out in front of Fort Ticonderoga. The United States Army Corps of Engineers is very well aware of it. The Champlain-Hudson Power Express is extremely well aware of it. They weren't able to bury very high voltage electrical transmission lines through this giant sludge bed. They were stopped by the EPA and the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The state of Vermont's Attorney General All the newspapers and television stations in Vermont and New York State are very well aware of this giant, massive contamination and poisoning of Lake Champlain, along with the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News. They're all totally aware of it, along with the governor of the state, Andrew Cuomo, several governors of New York State, the Glens Falls Post-Star, NPR Radio, National Public Radio, is fully aware of this entire fact. These are facts, backed up with huge amounts of records. So you've got massive numbers of witnesses and massive numbers of evidence, pieces of evidence, all kinds of it, including the records of the United States Supreme Court. I've got the audio recordings where this giant mess is discussed with U.S. Supreme Court justices. It's too dangerous to remove from the lake. So the idea that this is just a fantastical or a delusional story, well, get a hold of Tom West. Get a hold of Tom West and the West Law Firm in Albany, New York. And get a hold of, oh, I don't know, the Glens Falls Post-Star and the Lake George Mirror and the Lake George Warrensburg News. And let's see, the Troy Record, the Albany Times-Union, and anybody you want to. Get a hold of the town of Lake George, the town of Bolton, Queensbury, New York, the town of Queensbury. Get a hold of the Warren County supervisors and ask them about this giant flushing operation that the Lake George Park Association, the Lake George Park Commission does. And ask Union College and ask RPI University. And the list of witnesses just goes on and on and on and on and on. Now I'm going to wrap this one up a little bit short. I do want to show you one thing here, though, before I conclude this particular video. But when it comes to understanding the law and procedures before the U.S. courts, this ain't my first rodeo. This is not my first rodeo, and this dismissal is particularly unacceptable because it's nothing but a hatchet job and a court stripping. It's the rocket docket, just like Judge Posner has referred to, just like Judge Edith Jones, and the judges involved here are Judge Niemeyer, Moats, King, and a Judge Boyle. Just rubber stamped it. Rubber stamped it, no explanations, affirmed, denied, summary judgment, throw it in the trash. Just exactly like Judge Edith Jones described to Harvard University. The courts are corrupt beyond all recognition. Just exactly like Judge Posner describes, and precisely and exactly the court stripping that Anthony Lewis had been writing about in the New York Times. So folks, I'm going to leave it right there. This is just the beginning of this war. These people raped my mother and father for 600 acres on Lake George, New York, stole their business. Biggest marina on Lake George was stolen, and their home. They wiped my parents out. And we didn't have the internet back in those days, and I didn't have any way to do any kind of a investigation or research. Hell, I was a 14-year-old kid. When all this happened, I was 14 years old, and I had no idea about what was going on or who was doing what, and all the records were being kept secreted by the people doing it, the people that own and operate dam number 230, or what's known as Dam A at Ticonderoga, New York. And you can look up all this poisoning of Lake Champlain and poisoning of Lake George and the flushing of the mill pond, and what you'll discover is that this video is factually, legally correct. I'm going to leave it right there, folks, and this is just the beginning of this war. They have got it coming. I don't know how many people they've court stripped and rocket docketed and stripped them for their rights to equal protection and due process of the law. But I'm going to guarantee you one thing, we're going to find out. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, hasta la vista. God bless, and you betcha we're definitely, positively coming back.